Francine Pascal's Sweet Valley High, number 56, Lost at Sea. Copyright 1989, Francine Pascal.
Jessica, you're going on a science class field trip, not entering the Miss Teenage America contest. Elizabeth Wakefield reminded her twin sister with a slightly exasperated smile. Jessica had been poised in front of the mirror for 20 minutes in the bathroom the 16-year-old twins shared. She gave her long lashes one final dab with the mascara brush, then turned to Elizabeth. Liz, for somebody who wants to be a famous writer, sometimes you have absolutely no imagination. This may just be a class field trip to you, but I can see its deeper potential, Jessica declared in a sophisticated tone. For example, it's a chance to work on my tan and a chance to work on Ken Matthews. Wiggling her eyebrows suggestively, Jessica strolled past Elizabeth out of the bathroom. Ken Matthews, Elizabeth repeated, surprised. A classmate of theirs at Sweet Valley High, Ken was captain and star quarterback of the school football team. Jessica had dated Ken occasionally in the past, but Elizabeth had thought that it was as far as their romance was concerned. "Since when are you interested in Ken again?" she asked. "Since I checked out the list of people signed up for the field trip, and he was the cutest one on it," Jessica answered matter-of-factly from her bedroom. Elizabeth laughed as she pulled her shoulder-length blonde hair up into a ponytail. Trust Jessica to have anything but academics in mind. Elizabeth wasn't exactly surprised, though. Their attitude toward school was only one way in which she and her twin differed. It was true that, on the outside, the beautiful Sweet Valley High juniors were nearly mirror images of one another. Both were 5.5 feet tall, with perfect, willowy size 6 figures. Both had silky, sun-streaked blonde hair and eyes the same blue-green shade as the nearby Pacific Ocean. But when it came to the inside, they were definitely individuals, as different as avocados and oranges. Elizabeth, the elder twin by 4 minutes, was generous, thoughtful, and responsible. She was serious about her schoolwork and about her steady boyfriend, Jeffrey French. While she enjoyed a good party as much as anyone, she was just as happy to take long walks with Jeffrey or spend an evening listening to music and talking to her best friend, Enid Rowlands. Elizabeth dreamed of someday being a professional journalist, and with that goal in mind, she spent a good deal of her spare time writing for the Oracle, Sweet Valley High's newspaper. Jessica, on the other hand, wasn't interested in the future. She lived for the moment. Being spontaneous sometimes got her into trouble, but she could always, well, almost always, count on Elizabeth to help her out. While Elizabeth composed Eyes and Ears, her weekly gossip column for the Oracle, Jessica devoted her extracurricular energies to the cheerleading squad, of which she was co-captain. As for boys, Jessica had been famous for playing the field until she had met A.J. Morgan. For a while, she and A.J. had been a steady couple. But even though she had cared more deeply for A.J. than she ever had for another boy, Jessica still had been tempted to wander. She had learned her lesson the hard way after a brief, thoughtless fling with a handsome surfer became complicated, finally endangering both her life and Elizabeth's. Now, although Jessica's heart still ached a little when she thought about A.J., she knew breaking up with him had been for the best. She wasn't grown up enough to commit herself to a relationship with just one person. It was more fun to be free and to flirt whenever she felt like it. Toward that end, Jessica had been pleased to hear that Ken Matthews would also be going on the marine biology field trip that afternoon. Tall, blonde, and well-built, Ken was far and away the most interesting and attractive boy in the small group of students signed up for the trip. It was part of Jessica's creed to make the best of any situation, and she intended to do just that. She would have done almost anything to get out of the Sunday afternoon field trip to Anacapa Island, but unfortunately, her midterm chemistry grade was far from respectable. Her teacher, Bob Russo, had practically ordered her to sign up for the optional trip. "You need all the extra credit you can get, Jessica," he had pointed out dryly. Jessica reluctantly admitted to herself that she was lucky. Mr. Russo was willing to give her extra credit since the field trip had nothing to do with chemistry. He could have made her spend hours in the lab doing extra experiments. Elizabeth, on the other hand, had an A average in chemistry. She had signed up for the trip because visiting the small, deserted island sounded like fun. Studying the tide pools and ecology of the unspoiled island might give her an idea for an article. And of course, the fact that Enid was going didn't hurt either. Elizabeth grabbed a notebook from her work table and went downstairs. She glanced at the clock in the kitchen. It was 12:45, and they were due at the marina at 1 o'clock sharp. "Jess, we're going to miss the boat, literally!" she shouted up the staircase to her sister, who was still dawdling in her bedroom. A few moments later, Jessica appeared and began a leisurely descent of the stairs. She didn't own a wristwatch, for she didn't share her twins' respect for punctuality. As far as Jessica was concerned, she was never late, because nothing ever started until she got there. "Hold your horses, Lizzie," she said cheerfully. "Mr. Russo won't leave without us. He'd just have to arrange another field trip so I could get enough extra credit to pass chemistry." Elizabeth shook her head with good-natured disapproval, as much at Jessica's appearance as at her words. "Now that's a practical field trip outfit," Elizabeth observed. Jessica glanced down at herself. She was wearing new flimsy thong sandals, the same cherry red as her toenail polish. Her very short, very snug iced denim shorts made the most of her slim bronzed legs. On top, a skimpy bandeau left her shoulders bare for optimal tanning exposure, and optimal exposure for admiring male eyes. In contrast, Elizabeth, always a conservative dresser, wore a shell-pink scooped neck top, Bermuda shorts, and sneakers. "Don't worry," Jessica assured Elizabeth. She waved the gauzy white shirt she was holding in her right hand along with her sunglasses and a bottle of tanning oil. "I won't scandalize Mr. Russo by showing up half-naked for his field trip." She smiled slyly. "I'll cover up until he's not looking." Elizabeth grinned and then grabbed Jessica's arm, pulling her toward the door. "At this point, I don't care if you go in your underwear. Let's just get moving." They detoured through the backyard to say goodbye to their mother and father, who were lingering over coffee and the Sunday paper by the pool. Then the twins hopped into the old red Fiat convertible they shared, which was parked in the driveway alongside their split-level home. Elizabeth took the wheel, which was fine with Jessica. She leaned back in her seat as Elizabeth cautiously backed into the street. Tipping her head back and closing her eyes, Jessica enjoyed the feel of the sun on her face and the wind in her hair. It was another beautiful day in Sweet Valley, California. She might have preferred to be at the beach all day, but as long as she was outside getting some sun, even a school trip was all right. And who knows, Jessica thought, opening her eyes just as the Fiat topped a hill, affording her a glimpse of the Pacific Ocean, sparkling blue beyond the lush green valley. She pictured herself with Ken, strolling hand in hand down a postcard-perfect island beach. This field trip could turn out to be a real adventure. "Everybody's here, finally," Bob Russo announced crisply, glancing at Jessica and Elizabeth. "Now let's see. We've got 16 juniors from 3 different science sections, just right for breaking up into 4 teams of 4. As Mr. Russo checked their names off on the list on his clipboard, Elizabeth walked over to greet Enid, while Jessica joined her friend Lila Fowler. Lila was standing at the end of the dock, looking bored. She greeted Jessica with a yawn, covering her mouth with one elegantly manicured hand. "This is going to be the worst," Lila moaned. "A whole day wasted just to raise my science grade a measly point or 2. I can't believe Amy wormed her way out of this," she said, referring to their friend Amy Sutton. Amy had told Mr. Russo that due to a family obligation, she would be unable to make the trip. But both Lila and Jessica knew she was spending the day at the beach with Bruce Patman. "Oh, come on, Lila," Jessica waved an arm at the wind-ruffled water. "Look at it this way. Amy will have to write a 5-page paper to get her extra credit, and we just have to go cruising around in a boat for hours." "Yes, but look at the boat." The breeze blew a long strand of Lila's wavy light brown hair across her face as she nodded disdainfully toward the end of the pier. "We're going to be crammed in there like sardines." The chartered power boat looked roomy enough to Jessica, but she could see how it might not meet Lila's standards. To Lila, the daughter of one of the wealthiest men in Southern California, a boat ride was usually a Caribbean cruise on an ocean liner. Lila had everything money could buy, and she was lavished with gifts and spending money by her father. Jessica alternated between envying Lila's status and possessions and being irritated by her snobby act. Now Jessica shrugged off Lila's whining. She scanned the rest of the group through the dark lenses of her sunglasses. Elizabeth and Enid were chatting with Tom McKay, a good-looking tennis player whom Jessica had casually dated. A half-dozen other kids she didn't know very well were milling about. On the far side of the pier, Ken Matthews and Aaron Dallas were laughing at something Winston Egbert had just told them. Jessica tapped Lila on the shoulder. "There's my reason for taking a positive attitude toward this otherwise boring beyond belief trip." She pointed discreetly in Ken's direction. Lila followed Jessica's finger. "Who, Winston Egbert?" she teased. Jessica snorted. "That buffoon? Ha ha, guess again." "Ken Matthews?" When Jessica nodded, Lila yawned again. "Oh, Jess, he's such old news. Can't you do any better than that?" Jessica took another look. "'Fraid not," she said. "Aaron Dallas and Tom McKay are taken, and Mr. Russo's too old." Lila giggled. "Nope," Jessica concluded. "I assure you I've given this some thought. It's Ken or no one." Lila raised a slender eyebrow. "You're sure not wasting any time hunting down another boyfriend?" Lila's insinuating tone infuriated Jessica. She distinctly recalled several times when Lila had started seeing someone new only seconds after breaking up with a previous boyfriend. "Don't preach to me," Jessica warned her. "AJ and I are completely over. Ancient history. It's been ages." Lila laughed airily at Jessica's exaggeration. "I was just kidding you. Go for it. Good luck." Just then, Jessica tuned back into Mr. Russo. "So, for the teams," he was saying. Her ears perked up. Obviously, there wasn't a moment to lose if she wanted to be assigned to the same team as Ken. She could just join Ken, Aaron, and Winston. That was 4 people right there. She liked Aaron, and she would even put up with Winston's looniness to be with Ken. "You said go for it, Lila. Watch this." Pushing her sunglasses up on her head, Jessica strolled across the pier toward the 3 boys. It appeared that Winston, known as the class clown, was in the middle of another joke. He was waving his long, skinny arms and making goofy faces, while Ken and Aaron guffawed. "Hi, guys," Jessica said brightly, flashing Ken her most brilliant smile. "Am I in time for the punchline?" Before Winston had a chance to finish his story, Mr. Russo resumed speaking. "Team 1, Mr. Russo scanned the group in a businesslike way. "Enid Rowlands, Elizabeth Wakefield, Ken Matthews, and Aaron Dallas. Team 2, Jessica Wakefield, Winston Egbert, Lois Waller, Randy Mason. Team 3, Jessica's mouth dropped open. Winston Egbert and who? Mr. Russo had to be kidding. There she was, practically standing on Ken Matthews' gorgeous toes, and Mr. Russo had gone and stuck her on a team with 2 nobodies and the class clown. Shy, chubby Lois Waller, the daughter of the high school dietitian, had about as much personality as a marshmallow. And all Jessica knew about nerdy Randy Mason was that he was active in the Sweet Valley High Computer Club. This was pathetic, she thought. Was there no justice in the world? "So finish your joke, Egbert," Aaron urged him. Inwardly fuming, Jessica turned away, not bothering to listen. It was only too obvious. The joke was on her. By the time the charter boat, the Maverick, chugged away from the dock 10 minutes later, Jessica had regained her good spirits. Maybe she and Ken wouldn't be studying the same tide pool, but they would still have plenty of time to talk on the boat, since the ride was an hour each way. In a lecture-like tone, Mr. Russo went over the buddy system and onboard safety procedures, pointing out where the life jackets and self-inflating lifeboats were stored. Then his face relaxed into an unusually jovial smile. "Class dismissed," he said, adding, "but only until we get to Anacapa Island." When Mr. Russo turned his back to talk to the Maverick's captain, Jessica whipped off her gauze shirt. "Time for some sun and fun," she announced to Lila, Elizabeth, and Enid, with whom she was sitting on one side of the boat. Out of the corner of her eye, she could see Ken and Aaron lounging near the bow. "Feel like taking a little walk, Lila?" Lila nodded, but before they could take a step, Winston bounded into their path. "Hey, buddy!" He threw his arm around Jessica's shoulders. "You weren't thinking of going anywhere without me, were you?" Jessica shrugged Winston's arm off with a scowl. When Mr. Russo had split the team into pairs for the buddy system, she had ended up with Winston as her buddy. She didn't mind him in small doses. He could be pretty funny sometimes. Unfortunately, the field trip had only just started, and already Jessica felt as if she'd had enough of him. "Winston, we only have to be buddies in case of an emergency," she said, stepping around him. "A buddy's a buddy," Winston insisted. "I feel it's my duty not to let you out of my sight. What if you fell overboard because your buddy wasn't looking out for you?" Jessica rolled her eyes at Lila. "Thanks, but I'll take my chances," she told him. Grabbing Lila's arm, she practically ran across the boat toward Ken and Aaron, figuring Winston would get the message. But no sooner had Jessica greeted Ken, giving him her second dazzling smile of the day, than Winston poked his head between them. With his San Diego Padres baseball cap turned backward on his head, he looked even more ridiculous than usual. "Jessica Wakefield," Winston began, imitating Mr. Russo's deep, authoritative voice. "I'm going to have to assign you a week of detention for violating the rules of the buddy system." "So, Ken, don't tell me you're bombing in chemistry, too," Jessica said, turning her back on Winston. Ken, who had been leaning on the rail of the boat, turned to face Jessica. "You got it," he confirmed with a wry grin. "You didn't think I came on this field trip for the joy of learning." Jessica laughed. "I know you better than that, Matthews," she assured him with a meaningful flutter of her eyelashes. "Hey, buddy, enough chit-chat." Jessica whirled around, annoyed. Winston, his arms piled high with bright orange life jackets, was standing right behind her. Before she could protest, he slipped 2 life preservers around her neck. "Safety first, Jessica," Winston reminded her. Ken, Lila, and Aaron doubled over with laughter. Jessica, however, was not amused. "Egbert, you idiot!" she exclaimed, waving her arms toward off a 3rd life jacket. "Why don't you go jump in the ocean?" In a flash, Winston was at the railing, his hands clasped in front of him and his knees bent as if ready to jump. Jessica groaned as she wriggled out of the life jackets. It was all she could do to restrain herself from reaching forward to give Winston a push. In the meantime, Ken and Aaron had launched into a discussion with Lila. Jessica casually walked over to them and interrupted the conversation. "Anyone want to go with me to ask the captain if we can drive the boat for a while?" she asked, looking right at Ken. I do, Winston answered, running over. Before Jessica could say she had changed her mind, Winston was steering her toward the upper deck. "Come on, buddy!" "I have a feeling this is going to be a long afternoon," Jessica muttered to herself. End of Chapter 1.